Welcome back to CIA Declassified. July 1954, the Geneva Accords have just been signed. Vietnam is split at the 17th parallel. In the north, they prepare to take full control. In the south, a fledgling government, supported by the United States, is struggling to find its footing. The CIA saw a problem. The South needed a population base that was fiercely anti communist. They needed a Catholic voting bloc, and they needed it fast. Colonel Edward Lansdale, the man who had just finished weaponizing vampires in the Philippines, was sent to Saigon to manage the migration. His mission wasn't just logistical, it was psychological. His code for the operation? Safe passage. Lansdale's team didn't use logical arguments. They used black radio broadcasts that pretended to be from indigenous North Vietnamese sources, but were actually piped in from CIA-controlled transmitters. A quote from Colonel Edward Lansdale's field logs. The objective was to create a climate of fear so pervasive that the choice to stay became unthinkable. We used their own faith as the catalyst. If the people believed that God had left the north, they would follow him to the south. End quote. The CIA distributed thousands of leaflets featuring the Virgin Mary heading south. They hired fortune tellers to move through northern villages, whispering prophecies that the communist takeover would be followed by a divine plague that would specifically target those who remained under Ho Chi Minh's rule. The black radio scripts were masterpieces of disinformation. They broadcast reports of communist concentration camps that didn't exist yet, using actors to play the roles of escaping victims. A quote from a declassified PSYOP directive from 1954. Broadcast content must emphasize the Christ has gone south theme, utilize local dialects and religious terminology to create an authentic sense of spiritual urgency. The goal is a mass exodus before the 300-day window of the Geneva Accords closes. End quote. Lansdale even went as far as hiring astrologers to publish almanacs predicting disaster for the North and a golden age for the South. These almanacs were dropped by the millions over northern provinces. Internal CIA memos from 1955 reveal that the agency collaborated with the U.S. Navy to ensure the transport ships used in Passage to Freedom were equipped with loudspeakers. As the refugees boarded, they were greeted with pre-recorded messages of welcome and salvation, reinforcing the idea that they were part of a holy migration. There is a high degree of speculation that the CIA utilized subliminal acoustic layering during the black radio broadcast. Historians theorize that behind the religious chanting and news reports, the agency was testing low-frequency dissonance tones designed to keep the listeners in a state of low-level anxiety, making them more susceptible to the call to the south as a form of relief. The agency tracked the success of the operation using village sentiment audits. They would count the number of abandoned huts in a given province against the number of radio sets distributed. The correlation was nearly 1-to-1. Where the CIA's radio could be heard, the village eventually emptied. A quote from the CIA Office of Policy Coordination report. Operation Safe Passage has successfully shifted the demographic weight of the region by injecting 300,000 committed anti-communists into the southern provinces. We have provided the southern regime with the human shield necessary for survival. End quote. Speculation exists regarding the Lansdale Diem Pact, specifically concerning the manufactured martyrs program. Some investigators suggest the agency staged violent incidents in northern villages, faking communist raids on Catholic shrines to create a visceral, immediate reason for families to flee. It is speculated that these tactical provocations were coordinated with black flight airdrops of weapons to create the appearance of a northern civil war that didn't yet exist. A quote from Admiral Lorenzo Sabin, Commander Task Force 98. The psychological pressure was so intense that some people arrived at the docks with nothing but the clothes on their backs, convinced the very air in the north was becoming toxic to the faithful. End quote. There is significant speculation that the CIA utilized linguistic anchoring techniques derived from early behaviorist research by repeatedly pairing specific religious prayers with high-pitched, unsettling frequencies during nighttime broadcast. It is speculated that the agency induced a Pavlovian response in the rural population. This would mean that the simple act of hearing a call to prayer would trigger an instinctive flight response, effectively herding civilians toward the ports without the need for physical force. The most heavily redacted section of the Safe Passage files is Annex 14, Indigenous Belief Systems. Over 50 pages are completely missing from the public record. There is intense speculation that these pages detail the CIA's involvement in staged miracles. Theories suggest the agency used early holographic projectors or ghost lights in the mountains of the north to simulate religious apparitions. The speculation is that the agency didn't just tell the people God was moving south, they tried to show them. Further speculation suggests that the redactions hide the forced relocation metrics. While the official history paints this as a voluntary exodus, some historians believe the redacted sections detail how the CIA used local Catholic militias to threaten reluctant families into leaving, ensuring the 300,000 person quota was met at any cost. Was Operation Safe Passage a success? Operationally, it was one of the agency's greatest triumphs. It physically moved 300,000 people, eventually totaling nearly 1 million, including later waves, and effectively created the political base of South Vietnam. Without this operation, the Republic of Vietnam would likely have collapsed within months of its inception. However, historians argue it was a long-term disaster. The influx of Northern Catholics into the predominantly Buddhist South created intense religious and social friction, which eventually led to the 1963 Buddhist crisis and the very instability the CIA was trying to prevent. Safe Passage redefined the black arts of the agency. As far as technological breakthroughs, there are two big things. Portable transmitter tech. The need for mobile black radio led to the development of the suitcase transmitter, a powerful shortwave radio that could be hidden in a standard piece of luggage, and high-speed leaflet dispersion. The creation of the Lansdale bomb, a specialized canister that opened at a specific altitude to ensure leaflets covered an entire village without being scattered by high-altitude winds. Operational breakthroughs. The operation proved that spiritual intelligence was a valid field. It led to the CIA's permanent religious affairs desk dedicated to studying how to use faith as a lever for geopolitical change. The voices of Safe Passage eventually went silent, but the echoes remained. The families who moved south would become the vanguard of a war that would last another 20 years, a war fueled by a fear that was broadcast into existence by a few men in a hidden room. Next time on CIA Declassified, we move into the final years of the Cold War and the corridors of the Reagan White House. We examine the Star Wars briefings. Based on document CIA RDP-88B00443R001804360010-3, we explore the agency's secret assessment of the Soviet Union's genuine paralyzing fear of the Strategic Defense Initiative. We'll look at how the CIA used technical bluffing to convince the Kremlin that the U.S. was on the verge of making nuclear missiles obsolete even when the technology didn't exist. Join us for the Kremlin's panic. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.